All right, y'all. I am running into having to record these videos 2 times over. This series is extremely challenging. This is the most challenging series I have done on my YouTube channel yet. So, anyways, my birthday was yesterday. So, happy birthday to all the Pisces or INFJs out there. That is my ego, my sun sign. My Mercury is in Aquarius and the 11th house. My Venus is also in Pisces as well as North Node. Aries rising, and 85% of my personality is Capricorn or the ISTJ. So I have a stellium in Capricorn, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, you name it. Midheaven in Capricorn. So I am not your typical Pisces. And also, I am older. I am over 35. And so I am certainly tuned in more to my Aquarian energy. So, anyways, happy birthday to all the Pisces out there. I am super happy that I am doing a video on you this evening. All right, so this is my second attempt to film this video. So hopefully it goes well. I probably have 4 hours of video work to do on Pisces or the INFJ in this series. So I am probably 4 or 5, I'm not really sure, maybe 6 subscribers away from low tier monetization on my channel. So, if you want to give me a birthday gift, hit the thumbs up, like button, and subscribe to my channel. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. All right, so let's get into my introduction and the video. I did not get my key cards ready. I am going to have my key card on the screen as well as notes. So, there is a lot going on here, and I am excited. All right, so this is the moral cognition series. So we were talking about the masculine through the feminine ranking of all the personality types, as well as the moral load bearing, the heaviest moral load bearers to the lowest. I am in tier 3. That involves Taurus and Pisces on the moral load bearing scale. Pisces is number 12, or the most feminine in my masculine to feminine ranking. So we will be going through all of that in depth. And I also will be breaking down Pisces ego, astro-psychologically, as well as inner and outer masculine and feminine containment. All right, so I'm Heather with Underwater Panther, and the work I do on this channel lives at the intersection of astro-psychology, moral cognition, nervous system containment, polarity mechanics, and power dynamics across psyche and culture. I don't just study personality traits, I study consequence and conscience architecture. I study what happens after the moment, after the argument, the betrayal, the rupture, the apology, after the I didn't mean it like that, after the system fails and everybody acts like it didn't. Because most frameworks are obsessed with what people are, I'm obsessed with what people carry. Who absorbs collapse, who stabilizes the room, who holds the shame, the grief, the logistics, who holds the moral residue when everybody else discharges it and moves on. And Pisces is one of the most misunderstood load patterns in the entire zodiac, because Pisces is the archetype that carries weight the way the modern world recognizes weight. The modern world only recognizes load when it looks like action or masculinity. When it looks like enforcement, productivity, boundaries, when it looks like I fixed it. But Pisces doesn't carry like that. Pisces carries the invisible layer, the emotional atmosphere nobody wants to name, the grief in the room that's being talked over, the spiritual disillusionment underneath the conversation, the guilt under someone's anger, the loneliness under someone's ego, the pain under someone's I'm fine. Pisces is not here to manage systems. Pisces is here to metabolize what systems produce. And that's why Pisces is dangerous without containment, because when you absorb everything, you don't have structure. Your empathy becomes a sinkhole, not a gift, a sinkhole. Because empathy without boundaries does not create love, it creates contamination. Compassion without sovereignty does not create healing, it creates self erasure. Understanding without enforcement does not create justice, it creates tolerance of harm. So when I say Pisces is a moral load archetype, I don't mean Pisces is responsible. I mean Pisces is porous. Pisces is where the collective discharges pain when it doesn't know what to do with it. Pisces absorbs what nobody can hold cleanly, not because Pisces is weak, because Pisces, or the INFJ, I might add, is permeable. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the key cards, which I need to bring up many key cards because I will be rotating through a few. All right, so I should have done this prior to turning on the video, but I am winging it. All right, so here's Pisces key card. All right, so where was I? Pisces absorbs what nobody can hold cleanly, not because Pisces is weak, because Pisces is permeable. Because Pisces is Neptune, Neptune dissolves separation and dissolves edges. Neptune dissolves the illusion that we are not affecting each other. And when you combine that with Jupiter, expansion, faith, meaning, and belief, you get an archetype that can hold impossible paradoxes. Pisces can love people who are not lovable, can forgive what others cannot even look at, and can see the wound under the weapon. But that is not automatically a virtue, because compassion without containment becomes a bypass. And right now, the collective is flooded with Pisces language. Just let it go, just forgive, just surrender, just trust the universe. Everything happens for a reason. Don't judge, be the bigger person. And sometimes those are spiritual truths, but when those phrases are used to avoid consequence, that is not spirituality, that's disassociation with a halo. So this video isn't about Pisces traits, just Pisces traits. This isn't a softness montage. This is about the Pisces nervous system carrying moral pain and how that can either become true compassion or become disappearance. Because Pisces doesn't collapse like Capricorn, doesn't burn out like Virgo, doesn't explode like Scorpio. Pisces doesn't freeze like Taurus. Pisces evaporates into fantasy, into transcendence, sacrifice, savior loops, into other people's emotions, into I understand instead of I choose. And when Pisces is uncontained, the default survival strategy is simple. If I can't fix it, I'll soften it. If I can't soften it, I'll merge with it. If I can't merge with it, I'll disappear. That's Pisces distortion. So, what we're doing today is not just personality theory. We're mapping polarity mechanics, developmental order, mapping the direction energy moves under pressure. Because Pisces doesn't enter life through action, they enter life through meaning. And when meaning activates before structure, the nervous system learns I can survive by dissolving. I can stay safe by being agreeable. I can stay connected by absorbing. I can be loved by forgiving. And if nobody teaches Pisces how to build the spine, how to hold inner masculine, then Pisces becomes a spiritual sponge. They carry everyone, they understand everyone, they absorb everything, and slowly they stop existing. That is not compassion, that is drowning. So, this is about the difference between Pisces as healing and Pisces as avoidance, between surrender as wisdom and surrender as self abandonment. because Pisces can be one of the most powerful healers in the zodiac, but only when containment comes online, only when structure comes online, only when the nervous system learns the truth that Neptune cannot teach by itself. Love without boundaries is not love, it is leakage. And that's where we're going. So, why Pisces exists in the moral architecture? All right, so I do need to pull up my master key card here. All right, so I'm always constantly having to adjust where I'm sitting and shake the whole world. All right, so I'm going to actually make that smaller. Hopefully you can see it still. And I'm going to have to scoot way over here. All right, that is a typical thing I do. Excuse me. All right, so let me move some things around here. All right, so why Pisces exists in the moral architecture. All right, so let me go down here. All right, so I have done a video series on the most masculine through the most feminine. And you can find that in the prior videos. I do have many, like 20 playlists here on YouTube. This is the moral cognition playlist, but if you want to look into your own archetype specifically, I do have playlists for every single archetype. All of my moral cognition series videos are in your playlist as well. So feel free to indulge. I also have an ebook, a master ebook on Pisces. I think it's like 200 pages. That is on my website, and you can find that in the description box below. So my last series I did was on the most masculine to the most feminine. I do have that ebook uploaded, and now I'm working on my moral load bearing ranking, and I will, after I get these videos done in this series, I will upload that book, which it will be over 500 pages. This has been an immense task, to say the least. All right, so as you can see, Pisces is number 12 on this list as the most feminine of all the archetypes. And then, so I'm going to be bouncing around just a little bit. I do break everything down into tiers. So now we are working on my moral load ranking series. And so we are in tier 3, number 6. Pisces, or the INFJ, is number 6 on the moral load bearers. Just an FYI. So why Pisces exists in the moral architecture. So Capricorn carries consequence, Scorpio carries contamination, Cancer carries attachment, Virgo carries maintenance, and Taurus carries material stability. Pisces carries collective pain, not structurally, not operationally, not as a ledger, as atmosphere. Pisces holds grief that has no words, pain that has no solution, moral contradiction, spiritual disillusionment, compassion fatigue, the human condition itself. Pisces asks the question nobody else wants to live inside. How do we remain human while reality hurts? That is not weakness, that is existential containment. All right, so why Pisces sits last on the masculine vector, on the masculine ranking system. So I'm going to go back up here. So I am working with many different axes, as you can see. This is extremely dense. You're not going to find this anywhere else on YouTube. And so I'm working with astrology. So what the key card you're looking at is the ego. It's very foundational to the Pisces energy. If you have it in your sun sign, Mercury, moon, if you have a stellium, rising, you name it, you will get this energy. You will understand that it is certainly a part of you, but this is very foundational. So it is considered the ego, but if you have it somewhere else, you can see this within yourself. So there are 4 quadrants here. Astrologically, you break it down with the ruler, exaltation, left field, and fall. Psychologically, you break the ego down with the hero, parent, child, and inferior cognitive places. And then the functions are introverted, intuition, and I, extroverted feeling, FE, introverted thinking or TI, and extroverted sensing or SE in the inferior position. I will be breaking this all down in this video. So we have the planetary imprints, the psychological cognitive functions, and then I also break it down into inner and outer masculine. The whole archetype in itself is feminine under pressure. And then when we start talking about containment, we break down each quadrant into inner and outer masculine and feminine. So this is extremely dense. FYI. That is why I'm writing books, to have them available, because it is very dense. All right, so I've had many people tell me that they watch these videos multiple times and take notes. Believe me, I get it. That's why I'm writing books. All right, so why Pisces sits last on the masculine vector. All right, so first of all, I do want to specify this ranking system answers who initiates structure versus who receives and integrates it. So masculine is outward force, direction setting, boundary projection, initiates structure, and absorbs consequence. Feminine is inward processing, attunement, integration, response, integrates impact, and restores connection. So the lower tier, the more feminine, they're more about relational attunement under pressure. The more masculine, they are all about structure and action as a whole archetype, not the inner and outer masculine and feminine. So Pisces is the most feminine, and they carry the highest existential load. So masculine energy moves outward under pressure. Feminine energy absorbs inward under pressure. Pisces sits at the absolute feminine end because under stress, Pisces energy does not push reality, it absorbs reality. Every other archetype eventually externalizes pressure. Pisces internalizes it. Now, I don't really want to get too deep into this, but Pisces, they are pretty introverted. And I feel so deeply. I am a Pisces sun and Venus and North Node. And so I hold a very, very special place in my heart for Pisces because I understand the internalization of pain. They just take it and take it and take it. And they tend to be extremely creative people, very, very soulful people. And they just turn everything into beauty. It's like the flower in winter. Like, how are you here? I just had my email pop up. Hold on a second. Try later. I don't know why this is going off right now. It's right in my way. All right. So anyways, I just have a very special place in my heart for Pisces. All right. So under pressure, Pisces energy does not push reality. It absorbs reality. So Pisces internalizes it. Masculine and feminine here equals direction of energy flow under pressure. Not gender, not dominance, not strength. It answers one question. When stress hits, does energy move outward into action or inward into containment? All right, so the vector law. Every psyche has a pressure release direction. I already need a drink. All right, so under threat, hopefully that's big enough. You know what? I'm going to rotate these real quick because we're not getting too far into this key card yet. We're going to focus on this for a while. And so I'm just going to make it bigger so you can see it better. If I can get it where I want it. All right, good enough. As long as I can stay in the screen here. All right, so every psyche has a pressure release direction. Under threat, responsibility, or moral load. All right, so masculine vector exports energy, acts, structures, decides, moves outward. Actually, I think I'm just going to take this off for a moment. All right, so feminine vector absorbs energy, feels, contains, adapts, and metabolizes internally. So this scale becomes action through containment. So the most masculine to the most feminine, energy movement under pressure. So Capricorn or the ISTJ, under pressure, they move towards action immediately. All right, so energy moves outward first, duty activates before emotion. They build, carry, and execute. So Capricorns or the ISTJs are the most masculine, and they also carry the heaviest moral load. Very fascinating. All right, so then we have number 2, Aries or the ESTP. Under pressure, they have direct physical response. They move now, think later, body solves threat. Number 3, most masculine, Aquarius or the INTJ. Under pressure, they have strategic control. They're all about systems, architecture. Energy externalizes through systems and vision, reorganizing reality through systems. Very systematic. So Leo, number 4 masculine or the ESFP, under pressure, they express outward. Identity stabilizes through visible action. They show strength to survive. Number 5, Sagittarius or the ISTP, under pressure, they're independent, moving. They detach, act, and relocate. Freedom restores regulation. Then we have Virgo, number 6, ESFJ. Under pressure, they fix the environment. Energy still moves outward, but through service instead of dominance. So they correct and stabilize. Number 7, we have Scorpio or the ENFP. Vector turning point. Pressure splits direction. So they feel internally and then they strike externally. Absorption converts into action. Excuse me. Then we have number 8, Gemini. They are very androgynous. Believe it or not, the psychological arena people would argue to death about Gemini. No, they are not the most masculine. I tell you that right now. They like to yap. That's all they're good at is yapping. And they can be good at making money, but that's because they push responsibility onto everyone else. But anyways, whole nother video. I've done plenty of videos on Geminis. Wrote a whole book on Gemini. Never again. Be wary. All right, anyways, so I'm getting off rail. All right, Gemini, ENTJ, number 8, mental externalization. They talk, strategize, reframe reality verbally, movement through cognition. Number 9, Taurus, ESTJ. Under pressure, they hold first. So this is more feminine. Energy stops moving outward. They contain, endure, stabilize the body, and delay action. Now, the most feminine, we have number 10, Libra or the ENTJ, which they would argue left and right, up and down. They are very masculine. Very fascinating personality, to say the least. Anywho, under pressure, they deal with relational recalibration. Harmony maintenance replaces action, adjusts self instead of forcing world. So they use relationships and other people to do all of their dirty work. They like to stir the pot so that they can have balance according to how they like to balance things, supposedly. They stir up arguments between people and then pretend like they'd never caused the argument to begin with, and they'll be everyone's savior. That's very feminine, all right? That's like a feminine tactic, if you know what I mean. Number 11, Cancer, ENFJ. Very feminine. Under pressure, they absorb the emotional field. They carry others first and themselves last. And then we have Pisces, the INFJ. Under pressure, total internalization. Energy dissolves inward, meaning absorbs impact, no immediate external defense. I'm sorry, my nose is starting to run. It's cold out here. All right, so the moral load accumulates where energy cannot discharge outward. The more feminine the vector, they tend to contain inwardly. They have a lot of emotional storage, more delayed action, and heavier psychic carrying. All right, so now we're going to move on to briefing the moral load tier. Ranking, here we go, moral load. I can't get this where I want it. There we go. All right, cool. All right, so moral load tiers. So the heaviest containment of moral load bearing, we have Capricorn, the ISTJ, and Scorpio, the ENFP. Capricorn, duty load, Scorpio, trauma load. So Capricorns, they tend to structure the world. Under pressure, they act and then structure the world. Under pressure with Scorpio, they harden, they feel internally, and then they control threat externally. Then we have tier 2 with Cancer, the ENFJ, and Virgo, the ESFJ. Under pressure, Cancer is all about caring and protecting attachment. Virgos fix and stabilize through maintenance. And then the tier 3, which we are at now with Taurus and Pisces. So Taurus is the somatic moral carrier and Pisces is the existential moral load carrier. So Taurus, under pressure, they freeze and endure physically. Under pressure with Pisces, they dissolve boundaries and merge. Pisces does not resist pressure. Pisces becomes permeable to it. That is maximum feminine polarity. So what is moral load? So this moral ranking system answers when something goes wrong, who feels it inside first. So this is about internalized responsibility, conscience pressure, consequence absorption, guilt versus shame versus avoidance, who carries failure psychologically. This is the axis of moral gravity, and this is the one modern culture confuses with masculinity. They're not the same. Just because someone is high in masculinity, Capricorn is the odd man out here. They are the highest masculine and highest moral load carrier. But then you have number 2 Aries, top 2 masculine, and they are on the bottom tier of moral load bearing. They do not carry moral weight. Just FYI. So masculinity does not equal carrying consequences. Do not ever get that screwed up. That is not the case. All right, so what is moral load? It is what remains inside a human system after betrayal, abandonment, failure, corruption, relational collapse, unmet responsibility. It is the afterweight. It is what does not evaporate. Some nervous systems discharge that pressure outward. Some retain it internally. Some convert it into action. Some convert it into memory. So this framework identifies which archetypes retain weight and which releases it. That is the entire architecture. So we do have 2 fundamental nervous system types. The top moral load carriers are retention systems, nervous system. So we are talking about your nervous system and containment. So the retention systems are the top tier. They keep weight, they carry after the moment ends, they replay, they store, they metabolize responsibility internally or relationally. They feel impacted even when no one assigns blame. These systems become the stabilizers, the conscience carriers, the emotional infrastructure, the accountability anchors. They don't opt in, they are the container. So the top moral load bearers contain everyone else. The bottom ones scatter, and they are the motion systems. So just a quick reminder, we have top moral load carriers, Capricorn, Scorpio, Cancer, Virgo, Taurus, and Pisces are the middle tier. And then you have Aries, Leo, Libra, Sag, Aquarius, and Gemini in the bottom. So the bottom tier, we have motion systems, nervous systems. They move energy, they discharge, they reframe, they pivot when it comes to consequences. They act, express, narrate, philosophize, or redirect. They experience stress and then release it. They do not retain moral residue long term. These systems become initiators, disruptors, storytellers, explorers, identity movers, and belief carriers. They are not designed to store moral weight, they are designed to move systems forward. All right, so we are in tier 3. I am going to go over that very briefly because I do cover that later. So, tier 3, let me pull up Pisces and Taurus. So, Pisces and Taurus are in tier 3 for the moral load carriers. All right, so Tier 3, conditional load bearers. Absorbers without automatic retention. They carry weight only when trained or forced. So Taurus, the ESTJ, and Pisces, the INFJ. So if you are interested in Taurus, I have already done 2 videos over that. One is currently uploading. And here we are at Pisces. So Taurus and Pisces are conditional carriers. They absorb, but they do not automatically anchor. That distinction matters. They absorb pain but not consequence unless consciously developed. They feel deeply. They can endure pain. They can sit with suffering, but they do not naturally convert pain into responsibility or enforcement. They require development, training, or conscious structure to become long-term moral load carriers. Otherwise, they seek relief, they soften, soothe, they dissolve. They do not anchor responsibility by default. They tend to escape. They stabilize emotionally, not structurally. Taurus and Pisces are not low load archetypes. That is the next tier. So they can carry, but that is not their natural state. All right, so Taurus is the stability guardian, moral weight location, continuity, provision, safety. Taurus carries moral load through endurance, somatically. They feel responsible for keeping life stable and livable. Harm shows up as disruption to survival, not ideology. Pisces or the INFJ, they diffusion, moral absorber. Moral weight location, compassion, and collective pain. Pisces feels responsibility emotionally but diffuses it. They absorb suffering but struggle to hold consequence cleanly. Guilt is real, accountability is blurry. So the difference between tier 3 and tier 1 and 2. So tier 1 and 2 types retain moral residue automatically, cannot easily discharge responsibility, and feel internal obligation to act. So that's Capricorn, Scorpio, um Capricorn, Scorpio, gosh darn it, why am I drawing a blank? It's late. Cancer and Virgo. Yes, okay, I got it. Now that I lost my spot. All right, so tier 3 types, so Taurus and Pisces, absorbs emotional or environmental pressures. Do not automatically convert it into enforcement or structural correction. May carry deeply but selectively. Taurus absorbs for stability. Pisces absorbs for compassion. Neither naturally enforces consequences on self or others. That is why they are conditional carriers. All right, so this is a good time to take a drink again. I'm always battling. I've got a space heater going. It's freezing outside. I'm in my industrial office, shed office. Yay, fun. All right, so masculine types survive by moving pressure. Feminine types survive by holding pressure. And trauma reverses healthy flow. The moral load of a type is determined by where pressure goes when survival activates, outward into action or inward into containment. So masculine archetypes survive by separation. Pisces survives by non-separation. They instinctively perceive interconnected suffering. Oops, I'm going to take Taurus off of here now. I think we're done with that for a moment. All right, so they instinctively perceive interconnected suffering, collective emotion, unconscious motives, symbolic meaning, and spiritual continuity. So Pisces carries something no other archetype carries: psychological infinity and spiritual. They feel what has no edge. All right, so Pisces does not carry moral load by default. Pisces carries meaning. This is the tier 3 key. Pisces does not automatically retain responsibility when systems fail. They do not hold consequence like Capricorn. They do not confront corruption like Scorpio. They do not preserve attachment like Cancer. They do not maintain integrity like Virgo. Pisces retains meaning fields. They retain what things mean to everyone, what pain does to the soul. They retain the invisible cost of being alive. So when something destabilizes, Pisces does not ask first, who is responsible? What needs to be enforced? What must be repaired? Instead, they ask, how do I soften this? How do I forgive this? How do I make this survivable? Pisces regulates through compassion, not accountability. That's why they're conditional. They can carry, but they don't automatically anchor consequence. They absorb suffering, and without structure, they dissolve under it. Pisces is where pain becomes existential. Cancer feels emotionally, Scorpio feels psychologically, Virgo feels operationally, Capricorn feels structurally, and Taurus feels physically. Pisces feels cosmically. They don't just feel sad, they feel the meaning behind the sadness. They feel the grief underneath the argument, the wound underneath the pattern, the loneliness underneath the addiction, the fear underneath the cruelty, and the child underneath the adult. So that is heavy and I, Neptune, and Jupiter. Pisces core trauma pattern. So boundaryless compassion. Virgo learns I belong if I'm useful. Cancer learns I belong if I care. Capricorn learns I belong if I perform. Scorpio learns I belong if I survive. Taurus learns I survive if I provide. Pisces learns I'm safe if I disappear. I'm loved if I forgive. I'm good if I absorb. So they become mercy before they become sovereign. Pisces completes the zodiac containment cycle. So Capricorn begins the cycle. Reality must exist. Structure, responsibility, and survival. So we're talking on the moral load cycle here. Scorpio purifies corruption. Truth confronts decay. Cancer bonds life. Attachment forms. Virgo maintains life. Systems stabilize. Taurus embodies life. Matter sustains existence. And then Pisces dissolves life back into unity. Meaning returns to source. Pisces is not last. Pisces is return. The archetype where individuality softens back into collective consciousness. That's why Pisces energy feels ancient. All right, so now we're going to get into Pisces universal activation order. All right. So you probably have never seen this anywhere else in your entire life. Gladly presenting it to you now. So I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to have to move way over. All right. I'm about ready to pull this thing off the table. All right, so make sure that is big enough. I can never tell on OBS. All right. I feel like I just need to move this whole thing. It's ridiculous. You know, I probably could have done that instead of moving myself around. Alrighty, so I feel like that's taking up too much of the screen. All right, so this should be good visually, hopefully. All right, let's jam. I'm ready. Pisces universal activation order. All right, so we have a universal healthy activation order and a distortion order. So if you notice at the bottom, you will see the healthy order. So it's outer feminine, inner masculine, outer masculine. So keep that in mind. That is the healthy order of integration of inner and outer masculine and feminine containment. Now, Pisces distortion order is in order on your screen. So they go from the inner feminine to the outer feminine to the inner masculine to the outer masculine. So I'm going to keep this up on screen as we go through and explain each of these quadrants so you understand integration on the most deepest level you've ever understood Pisces in your life, hopefully. I want to be the master. Like I've been rocking and rolling with this stuff for 10 years now, and yes, I am absolutely trying to be the master at this. So, what Pisces should build when regulated, universal activation order. All right, so okay, so it should go outer feminine, inner masculine, outer masculine, perception, safety, values, action. But Pisces' nervous system often enters through meaning first, not boundary. So the meaning would be inner feminine and I, Neptune, and Jupiter. And then we have outer feminine with Fe and Venus. Then we have inner masculine, which is delayed with Ti and Mercury. And then outer masculine collapse with Se and Earth withdrawal. So they end up going through meaning, merging, understanding, and disappearing. So why Pisces? I'm going to skip that part actually. All right, so Taurus tends to skip inner masculine, Scorpio activates outer masculine early, Capricorn activates responsibility before safety. So each archetype has its own healthy and distorted orders. But Pisces diffuses containment itself. So they really need to focus on the inner masculine boundaries. All right, so all right, so the distortion here for Pisces, they tend to perceive. I need to move my note over. I'm struggling because my note is not all the way fully in screen, and I don't know why I've just been letting myself struggle for a while. Let's not do that. Okay. All right, so distortion sequence for Pisces. They tend to perceive first with, let me double check this. Inner feminine. So I do have it in order. Okay. So normally it should be outer feminine, inner feminine. So they perceive first with inner feminine and I, Neptune, and Jupiter. So perceiving is field reading and symbolic sensing. And then they absorb with Fe, parent, and Venus. Absorb is empathy as automatic containment. And then they go to understanding with Ti, child, and Mercury in left field. Understanding is their private meaning making. And then they disappear, which is action last, with their outer masculine, SE inferior, and earth and fall. Disappear, withdrawal, and disassociation when embodiment is demanded. All right. So the real Pisces distortion. So it is boundary collapse before identity stabilizes. So the resulting pattern, Pisces may empathize, geez. Pisces may over empathize harm, excuse violations, merge with unstable people, spiritualize dysfunction, delay decisions indefinitely, and disappear instead of confront. They don't fight collapse, they absorb it. All right, so a little side rail here. Why Pisces trigger awakenings in their relationships? Pisces unconsciously mirrors the unconscious. So they do say Geminis are the mirror as well, but Geminis are extremely topical. Pisces is the deepest mirror you will ever find. Don't ever get that twisted. Just saying. All right, so when Pisces meets people encounter their own unmet grief, hidden guilt, suppressed dreams, moral contradictions, and spiritual longing. Pisces reflects inner reality without attacking it. So others feel deeply seen, emotionally exposed, strangely safe, and spiritually stirred, but also destabilized. Because Pisces dissolves psychological defenses. People don't just date Pisces, they confront themselves through Pisces. So why Pisces burns out quietly? Other archetypes collapse visibly. Pisces collapses invisibly. Signs of Pisces overload: chronic fatigue, withdrawal, escapism, sleep dysregulation, emotional numbness, loss of motivation, and disassociation. The system shuts down input. Too much humanity entered one nervous system. True Pisces integration. Pisces does not need less empathy, they need containment. Integration means the inner masculine is strengthened. So that's TI child and Mercury in left field. Outer masculine is activated safely, which is SE inferior and earth and fall. They must learn compassion with limits, helping without merging, saying no without guilt, acting before exhaustion, grounding vision into reality. The mature Pisces realization. Love without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. When integrated, NI becomes wisdom, Neptune becomes intuition, Jupiter becomes faith, SE becomes embodied presence. Then Pisces stops dissolving and starts guiding. So every archetype learns how to survive reality. Pisces learns how to forgive it. But healing Pisces means learning that compassion does not require disappearance. The final step of development is not sacrifice, it is embodied mercy. All right, drink break. What am I home? An hour in? All right, so the universal sequence. Don't forget the universal sequence. It is at the bottom. Outer feminine, which represents, so every human psyche has 4 containment quadrants. Outer feminine, which is the perception, attunement, reading the field, environmental scanning, and emotional field reading. Inner feminine, which represents nervous system memory, safety storage, attachment, and somatic history. Inner masculine represents sovereignty, your values, meaning, moral spine, and internal authority, which is TI. Inner feminine, it's on the screen, but is NI, Neptune, and Jupiter. That's where the nervous system lives. Safety, storage, attachment, somatic history is NI, Neptune, and Jupiter for Pisces. Outer feminine perception. All right, so it's up on your screen. I'm getting my own self confused. Outer masculine represents action, enforcement, consequence, boundaries, and delivery. All right, so healthy development goes outer feminine, inner masculine, outer masculine. Perception first, safety second, values third, action last. That order matters. Trauma reverses it, responsibility reverses it. Pisces is not forced into responsibility like Capricorn. Pisces is forced into emotional infinity before containment. They absorb reality before identity forms. All right, so I'm going to go through what you've been reading. I'm going to read this on screen quickly. So Pisces is the dissolution, moral, load bearer, spiritual, emotional, it's a lot, meaning maker, whatever you want to call it. So their dissolution survival order. So this is their distortion order. All right, so they perceive, absorb, understand. All right, yeah, I do need to I sat on this last night. All right, so I am going to let me sit on this for one more moment. Yeah, I still think I hold on to this. All right, so they perceive, merge, understand, and then disappear or embody. All right. Inner feminine, you've got NI, introverted intuition, Neptune, and Jupiter. The symbolic perception, collective absorption, and meaning immersion. Pisces does not meet the world through events, they meet it through meaning fields. So Pisces absorbs before separating. Empathy becomes automatic containment. NI perceives trajectory. Neptune dissolves boundaries. Jupiter expands belief and compassion. Pisces absorbs existence itself. Outer feminine with Fe parent and Venus in exaltation. This is where their emotional attunement is, relational harmony, regulation, and compassion stabilization. Pisces organizes the emotional environment before organizing themselves. Love becomes regulation, harmony becomes responsibility, care replaces boundary. Inner masculine with TI, introverted thinking child, and Mercury in left field. This is their private logic formation, quiet meaning analysis, and internal truth seeking. Pisces develops reasoning internally and late, but because perception and empathy activate first, logic develops privately. They question silently, analyze internally. Oh, I just lost it. I'm sorry. Give me one moment. I've got like 200 pages here and it's getting weird with scrolling. But because perception and empathy activate first, logic develops privately. They question silently, analyze internally, rarely confront early. Truth stays internal. Philosophical self organization. Then we have the outer masculine with SE inferior, extroverted sensing inferior, and earth and fall. Embodied action, boundary enforcement, physical reality engagement. Action comes last. Reality feels loud, conflict feels invasive, sensory overload or moral exhaustion forces action. Then withdrawal happens suddenly. Disappearance, emotional shutdown, quiet exit, spiritual detachment, and evaporation. They carry suffering. They absorb chaos. They understand everyone. They forget themselves. They dissolve outward. Deep, ain't it? All right, so now we're really going to get into it. 54-minute opener. All right, I'm done. All right, so Pisces distortion order. We are jumping in. I got a super old song that just came on and it's hilarious. All right, so here we really go. Let me get I'm like right up on my space heater, and it's wild because I've had to move around so many times and I'm getting super hot. All right. Sweating. All right. All right, so we're gonna start with I always do that. I'm like, all right, I amp myself up. It's ridiculous. Okay, so we're going to start with hero, Neptune, and Jupiter. Symbolic perception, imagination field, meaning expansion. The inner feminine quadrant is the primary perceptual engine of the Pisces or INFJ archetype. This is where reality enters the psyche, but Pisces does not encounter reality in the same way most archetypes do. Where other archetypes perceive events, objects, or interpersonal signals first, Pisces perceives meaning first. Reality is experienced symbolically before it is experienced literally. Information arrives not as isolated facts, but as patterns, atmospheres, metaphors, and trajectories. The psyche immediately begins asking not what happened, but what does this mean? At the center of the perceptual field sits introverted intuition, or NI, the dominant cognitive function of the INFJ structure. NI does not gather information the way sensing functions do. Instead of scanning the external environment for concrete data, they are abstract. NI processes information internally, synthesizing patterns beneath the surface of events. It tracks invisible trajectories, where something is going, what hidden forces are shaping it, and what outcome is likely to emerge over time. So, Pisces are very future oriented, very future focused. Pisces are never in the moment. They have a very hard time grounding themselves in the present moment in their own body. Pisces lives their entire life having an outer body experience. They literally feel above earth. Think spiritual realm, think whatever you want, a goldfish, whatever you want to call it. I get it. I get it. So, they have a very hard time with time and scheduling. It's very wild, very abstract, very future focused, not present, not past, but future. All right. So, tracking invisible trajectories, where something is going. What hidden forces are shaping it and what outcome is likely to emerge over time. Very strategic. NI is not focused on the present moment, but on the direction of reality itself. It collapses complexity into a single convergent insight, like narrowing 1,000 possibilities into one underlying path. Because NI processes information internally and subconsciously, Pisces individuals often appear distant or contemplative. Their mind is not absent, it is operating beneath the surface. Patterns, metaphors, and symbolic relationships are being assembled in the background of consciousness. This is why NI users are often described as connecting the dots. They perceive relationships between ideas that others do not immediately see. A small behavior, a tone of voice, or a single detail can trigger a cascade of pattern recognition that reveals deeper motives, future implications, or hidden emotional dynamics. When NI operates within the Pisces archetype, it does not function alone. It is fused with the planetary influence of Neptune, the transpersonal ruler of Pisces. Neptune dissolves boundaries, where NI narrows perception towards a convergent insight. So you can picture NI like a sniper rifle. This is the best analogy I've ever heard. NI is a sniper rifle. You've got one shot, one kill. It is very focused on one path forward, one goal. In NE or extroverted intuition is like a buckshot, multiple paths forward. They understand how opportunities, they can see many different opportunities, and an I hero is focused on one path forward. So, where NI narrows perception towards a convergent insight, Neptune softens the edges of perception itself. Reality becomes fluid, porous, and dreamlike. The boundary between imagination and observation weakens. Images, metaphors, and archetypal symbols begin to carry as much psychological weight as literal events. Very dreamy people, very imaginative, very creative. Y'all, that's why I'm here. I've been dreaming this up my entire life since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. I saw myself doing this, and here I am. It's taken me this long. It's ridiculous. Because of this Neptunian influence, Pisces often experiences life through imagination and symbolic resonance. A song, a film, a dream, or a piece of art can communicate meaning more powerfully than direct conversation. Hello, Mercury in left field. We express ourselves better through poems, writing, video work, art, music. Yeah. So we're all about the creative expression over your simple conversation. So Neptune is a planetary field of creativity, myth, glamour, dreams, and illusion. It governs cinema, music, poetry, spirituality, and every form of expression that dissolves the rigid boundaries of literal reality. Through Neptune, perception becomes immersion. The mind does not simply observe life, it enters the symbolic atmosphere surrounding it. This is why many Pisces aligned individuals are drawn towards artistic and imaginative domains. Music, storytelling, photography, painting, writing, theater, and spiritual symbolism all operate in the same Neptunian perceptual language. They communicate meaning through imagery and emotional atmosphere rather than analytical explanation. Pisces understands this language intuitively because their perceptual architecture is already structured around symbolic interpretation. So, yet Neptune alone would create a psyche that dissolves endlessly into imagination. What expands this field into philosophical meaning is Jupiter, the classical ruler of Pisces. Jupiter magnifies whatever it touches, it expands perception outward into belief systems. Y'all, the amount of systems that I have studied in my life, religion, you name it, the amount of systems I am combining here is literally Jupiter expanded on Neptune. Like, it is wild. And Venus, you know. All right, so sorry, I just had to, like, wow. So what expands this field into the philosophical meaning is Jupiter. So Jupiter magnifies whatever it touches. It expands perception outward into belief systems, mythologies, and moral frameworks that attempt to explain existence itself. Through Jupiter, the symbolic patterns perceived by NI and Neptune grow into universal meaning. A personal experience becomes a philosophical insight. A small emotional event becomes a reflection of humanity as a whole. Jupiter introduces the drive toward understanding the bigger picture of life. It asks questions such as, what does suffering mean? What purpose does this experience serve? What lesson is hidden inside this event? The Pisces psyche therefore expands every perception into a wider moral or existential framework. Instead of focusing on immediate consequences, the mind moves outward towards themes like compassion, forgiveness, redemption, and interconnectedness. When NI Neptune Oops, I lost my spot. When NI, Neptune, and Jupiter operate together, they create one of the most expansive perceptual architectures in the zodiac. NI provides the pattern tracking vision. Neptune dissolves boundaries and introduces imagination and symbolic depth. Mainly P. Hall. Pisces, Sun, Pisces, Mercury. Mainly P. Hall. Imagine. I have his book right behind me. What is it called? The Secret Teaching of All Ages. Mainly P. Hall. There was another one. I can't remember the other Pisces, but absolutely fascinating. My opinion, the most beautiful minds ever. Ever. All right, so where was I? Jupiter magnifies the meaning of those perceptions until they become philosophical or spiritual insights. The result is a psyche that does not simply observe reality, but attempts to interpret the meaning of existence itself. Because of this architecture, Pisces individuals often appear visionary, creative, or mystical. They are naturally oriented towards big picture thinking, metaphors, and abstract understanding. They may experience moments of sudden insight or desperate experiences suddenly connect into a coherent pattern. Like the amount of I keep a notepad with me at all times. My phone, I love physically writing. I loved calligraphy. I still write in cursive. I have a notepad with me at all times because I will get a download in the weirdest time and I have to immediately write it down. It is wild. So these insights can feel almost prophetic, not because they are supernatural, but because the mind has been quietly synthesizing patterns beneath conscious awareness. This perceptual style also explains why Pisces often feels emotionally permeable. Neptune dissolves the boundary between self and environment, so emotional atmospheres can be absorbed unconsciously. The sponge. It is so sad. You gotta tune that down. Other people's whatever is going on with another person around you is not your business and not your responsibility. However, this absorption is not simply emotional empathy, it is in the interpersonal sense, it is more accurately described as symbolic immersion. Pisces does not merely feel another person's emotions, they sense the narrative, the context, the underlying suffering or hope that surrounds those emotions. Pisces are the absolute best at understanding other people's potential. I don't know how many times I was on YouTube and I started watching someone's channel and I was like, oh, they're going places. And I got to watch this channel explode over time. Seeing potential in people is what we are really, really good at, Pisces INFJs. So, in this sense, Pisces perceives life less like a sequence of isolated events and more like a story unfolding through symbolic patterns. Every interaction contains a deeper meaning. And I'm constantly saying every archetype I'm going to be circling around my entire life. It's never ending. Learning is never ending. Every interaction contains a deeper meaning. Every conflict reflects a larger moral dynamic. Every moment contains the potential for myth, lesson, or transformation. Because perception occurs at this symbolic level, Pisces can struggle with literal reality when the imagination field becomes too strong. Neptune can blur boundaries between perception and fantasy, while Jupiter can expand interpretations into grand philosophical narratives that may or may not correspond to concrete circumstances. The mind may drift into idealism, so they are very idealistic. Escapism or spiritual abstraction when the symbolic field becomes overwhelming. However, when balanced and integrated, this perceptual architecture becomes an extraordinary asset. The combination of NI vision, Neptunian imagination, and Jupiterian meaning expansion allows Pisces to translate complex emotional or existential experiences into art, philosophy, spirituality, or healing insight. They become interpreters of the human condition, individuals who can take suffering, contradiction, and confusion and transform it into meaning that others can understand. This is why Pisces archetype has historically been associated with artists, mystics, spiritual teachers, and symbolic thinkers. Their nervous system is naturally attuned to the deeper layers of reality beneath ordinary perception. Manly P. Hall, number one. I think he wrote like 80 books at least, lectures all over the world. Yeah. So their nervous system is naturally attuned to the deeper layers of reality beneath ordinary perception. They see not only what is happening, but what it represents. They do not simply observe life, they interpret it. All right. So, this inner feminine quadrant represents the infinite receiving field of the Pisces psyche. It absorbs symbolic information from the environment and processes it internally until patterns form. The world enters the psyche as imagery, metaphor, emotion, and intuition before it ever becomes a concrete decision or action. Because of this, Pisces does not start life by asserting identity or enforcing boundaries. They begin by absorbing the meaning of existence itself. Identity forms later, after the symbolic field has already shaped the psyche. This is both the power and the vulnerability of the Pisces archetype. They perceive the invisible structure of reality, but they must eventually learn how to stand inside it. All right. All right, so now we're going to get into, let me read here. All right, so I'm going to go hard on this. I've already done, I don't even know what I'm at, maybe 70. I'm not even sure what I'm at with Pisces. I have tons and tons of videos on Pisces, but I'm just going to go hard because it is Pisces season and my birthday was yesterday. So this is going to be very long. It might be 3 videos deep, but that is okay. All right, so Pisces, INFJ. So we're going to go deeper into the Neptune and Jupiter. Imagination, permeability, illusion, ideal, mercy, expansion of meaning. So Neptune as Pisces, it depends on who you talk to. I think it's Jupiter. There are astrologers. I've noticed the younger astrologers don't use the outer planets because, oh my gosh, it's not even a real thing. But then some astrologers don't even use Earth, understand Earth itself. It's whatever. I mean, I am doing my own thing here. I've created my own lane, like, whatever. All right, so I'm going to talk about Neptune first. I'm just trying to trigger every single person. Psychological people, astrological people, containment people, nervous system people. you know. No, I'm just combining everything together. So, and cross-referencing is amazing because wow, hey, guess what? There's patterns. I see patterns and patterns and patterns. All right, so Neptune is as Pisces co-ruler is not primarily emotional. Neptune is non-linear perception. So, I don't have a good relationship with time itself, especially linear time. Like, think quantum mechanics here. So it's the dissolving force that removes edges between self and other, between present and past, between what happened and what it means. Neptune's core operation is permeability. It makes the psyche porous. It turns the world into a symbolic field rather than a list of events. That's why Pisces doesn't experience life as facts. Pisces experiences life as tone, mood, subtext, myth, music, and energetic weather. Neptune is the reason Pisces can walk into a room and instantly sense what is unspoken, not through logic, but through atmosphere. This is why Neptune reads as imagination, illusion, and spirituality. So, this is why they call Pisces the ocean itself. Pisces can be a cute little goldfish or a shark. So, Pisces is the ocean itself. Cancer is considered the wave. Scorpio is considered the freaking ice block or iceberg in the ocean, all by their lonesome. Pisces is the ocean itself. Neptune is certainly why. So Neptune is the reason Pisces can walk into a room and instantly sense what is unspoken. So this is why Neptune reads as imagination, illusion, and spirituality. It doesn't just daydream, it remaps reality into a meaning layer that can be more compelling than the physical world. Neptune makes the invisible feel more real than the visible. It's the part of Pisces that lives half inside the dream plane, the realm of symbols, signs, and synchronicities, archetypes, and intuitive knowing. Collective conscious, collective unconscious, whatever you want to call it. It's very collective. All right, let me scroll down here for a moment. All right, so Neptune doesn't ask, what is this? Neptune asks, what is this like? What is the metaphor? What is the hidden pattern? What is the spiritual story underneath the surface? And when Neptune is uncontained, this is exactly where distortion begins, because permeability without structure becomes flooding. Pisces doesn't merely empathize, Pisces absorbs. They are the sponge. Not as a choice, as an automatic nervous system reality. Neptune dissolves boundaries so thoroughly that Pisces can start living inside other people's pain, inside collective grief, inside the story of how the world should have been. This is why Pisces can carry suffering without appearing angry. Their system doesn't go into fight mode, it goes into merging mode. They soften into it, they spiritualize it, they reinterpret it, they try to transmute it. That's Neptune alchemy dissolving. It tries to turn poison into medicine by dissolving the poison into a larger ocean. So here's where Jupiter changes the entire equation. So Jupiter does not add more empathy. Jupiter adds expansion, meaning, belief, and moral vastness. Jupiter enlarges whatever Neptune makes permeable. Neptune opens the gate, Jupiter makes it infinite. Jupiter takes these symbolic impressions and scales them into a worldview. This is where Pisces becomes philosophical, spiritual, universal, and often unreasonably forgiving. Turn the other cheek. Just turn the other cheek, you know? I have a Pisces Venus, an ego, and yes, I try to hide that from people because it is my most extreme vulnerability. I am heavily into my Aquarius Mercury, Capricorn stellium, but I can tell you right now that I was raised Catholic, strict Catholic household. Turn the other cheek. My nature is already turn the other cheek. When you don't teach a Pisces boundaries, it's taken my whole life to understand boundaries. I feel your pain. That's another huge reason why I'm doing these lectures. Letting you know. I get it. I feel for y'all. All right. So, this is where Pisces becomes philosophical, spiritual, universal, and often unreasonably forgiving, not because they're weak, but because Jupiter makes them see life through a bigger lens. Jupiter says everything is a part of something larger. Everyone is human. Everyone is suffering. This is a lesson. This is karma. This is growth. Jupiter gives Pisces the capacity to frame pain inside a story big enough to hold it. When healthy, this is divine. It's the healer archetype, the mystic, the one who can sit with grief and not become bitter, the one who can see the wounded child inside the abuser, the soul, the lost soul inside the addict, the fear beneath the aggression. Jupiter expands compassion into spiritual intelligence. It makes Pisces capable of mercy at a level that shocks other archetypes because they aren't just responding to behavior. They're responding to the soul level narrative behind the behavior. But when distorted, Jupiter becomes the amplifier of Neptune's bypass. Because Jupiter doesn't only expand wisdom, it expands justification. Neptune dissolves boundaries and makes everything feel connected. Jupiter then comes in and says, therefore, everything is understandable. Therefore, everything is forgivable. Therefore, nothing needs consequence. Therefore, pain is just part of the story. Therefore, accountability is optional. This is the subtle trap in Pisces. Not emotionality, cosmic meaning inflation. Pisces can expand the narrative so wide that it dissolves the need for action. They can make an entire spiritual cosmology out of why something harmful is happening. And in doing so, avoid the simple embodied truth. This isn't okay. I need to leave. I need to say no. I need to enforce a boundary. This is why Pisces is in tier 3 in the moral load architecture and why they are conditional. Pisces carries suffering as meaning, but struggles to convert meaning into consequence unless the inner masculine TI and outer masculine SE are developed. So Neptune and Jupiter is the part of Pisces that can turn life into a mythic story. They don't just experience a breakup, they experience an archetypal death and rebirth. They don't just experience conflict, they experience karmic entanglement. They don't just experience sadness, they experience collective mourning, ancestral grief, the ache of humanity, the ancestral grief. I have been going through my genealogy. My great aunt passed away actually last March. So I've taken an entire year of studying into my genealogy, many generations back into my Native American side. And I can tell you that I have 3 tribal cards that I am working on getting the paperwork for. The ancestral grief is real. That is my own story. Every Pisces has a very deep, deep story. So, yes, they experience collective mourning, ancestral grief, the ache of humanity itself. This is why Pisces can seem dramatic to low permeability signs. But Pisces isn't dramatizing. They're scaling the emotional and symbolic field into a larger reality map. That is Jupiter. And because Pisces has an eye in the cognitive mechanism that organizes this, Neptune provides the ocean, Jupiter expands the ocean into meaning, Ni becomes the current, the organizing trajectory, the prophetic pattern recognition that says this is where this all goes. So, Ni, Neptune, and Jupiter. Triad is not feeling people. That is Effie and Venus. It's seeing the future through symbolism. It's dream logic that becomes fate logic. Pisces can watch a small behavior and instantly sense the entire arc of where it leads. Not because they're guessing, but because their perception is operating at the level of pattern and archetype, not surface detail. This is why Pisces can look psychic. They're not psychic in the cartoon sense. They're running a symbolic prediction engine. They sense what a thing means before it finishes happening. And when healthy, this becomes guidance, art, healing, and spiritual leadership. I want to pause for one moment. My grandmother, I actually come from a very long line on my mother's side. That's my Native American side. I'm not going to go too deep into that yet. I will do a whole thing on that soon. But from both sides of my family, I have a lot of educational teachers and spiritual preachers. And it's hilariously beautiful. It's in my blood. And here I am. Here I am teaching my own system of combined systems. It's really full circle and very beautiful. And I don't show this side of myself to many people. I'm very introverted. I am very selective with my time and letting people into my life. And so I don't let many people see this side of me. But yeah, anywho. All right, so where was I? All right, so they can feel where society is trying to evolve. Pisces can tell you what your nervous system is actually grieving beneath your words. They can sense the lie beneath the smile. They can see the future implications of a spiritual choice. That's Ni, Jupiter, and Neptune, functioning as a coherent meaning compass. But when unhealthy, it becomes fog, projection, and illusion. Neptune makes perception porous. So Pisces can absorb other people's identities. They confuse my feelings with the room's feelings. They can confuse intuition with anxiety. They can confuse spiritual insight with wishful thinking. Neptune can also glamorize the unreal. Fantasy partners, savior narratives, karmic soul contracts that justify staying too long. I'm not even going to get too deep into that. That is new age stuff. I cannot. Don't fall for it, please. They'll change logic. Love will heal them logic, you name it. Jupiter then inflates the fantasy into a belief system. That's the Pisces distortion path in one sentence. So Neptune dissolves boundaries, Jupiter sanctifies the dissolution. So Pisces doesn't just avoid conflict, Pisces can make avoidance feel holy. And this is where the moral load issue becomes visible. Pisces can carry pain indefinitely, but if they cannot convert perception into boundary, they become a sponge that leaks. They absorb suffering, transmute it internally, forgive it outwardly, and then disappear once embodiment is demanded. That is not weakness, that's a nervous system that never learned to anchor. So, what Neptune and Jupiter looks like when integrated. When Pisces is integrated, Neptune stops being escapism and becomes inspiration. Jupiter stops being justification and becomes wisdom. The psyche remains porous but not boundaryless. Pisces can still feel the ocean, can still be the ocean, they can still feel and be the ocean, gosh darn, but they learn to stand on shore when necessary. Integrated Neptune means imagination used to create, not to avoid. Spirituality used to clarify, not to blur. Compassion that includes truth. Softness that does not sacrifice self. Integrated Jupiter means meaning that supports action, forgiveness that does not erase accountability, mercy that includes consequence, belief that strengthens spine instead of dissolving it. Pisces does not need less compassion. Pisces needs containment strong enough to hold their compassion without drowning in it. Neptune opens the portal, Jupiter makes it infinite, but without structure, infinity becomes overwhelming. That's why Pisces integration always requires developing the inner masculine with introverted thinking, clarity, what is true for me, and outer masculine with extroverted sensing or SE inferior and earth, what boundary do I enforce now? All right, so Pisces does not meet life through events. They meet life through meaning fields. Neptune dissolves the edges, Jupiter expands the story, and I maps the trajectory. And the entire psyche becomes a receiver for the invisible. When regulated, they become the mystic, artist, healer, and guide. When unregulated, they become foggy, savior loops, fantasy, martyrdom, and disappearance. Dang. Hour and a half in, and I still have so much to go. I'm digging my playlist. I was doing the same video last night, and I was not digging my playlist. I just decided to scrap the whole thing. All right, so I am going to add a little bit more to this section here. So I might repeat myself a little bit, but it's fine. It hits different every time, right? All right, so NI Neptune Jupiter is the field perception, boundary dissolution, and expanded meaning. Reality felt as infinite meaning. All right, so Pisces reads reality symbolically first. They perceive emotional undercurrents, future trajectories, and invisible suffering and archetypal meaning. So Neptune dissolves separation immediately. Pisces merges before deciding. So NI, Neptune, and Jupiter creates a psyche that immediately asks, what does this mean? Why are people suffering? What is underneath reality? What future outcome is coming? They do not experience events. They experience symbolic resonance. So this is just kind of like a recap. So Pisces children often feel others' emotions as their own, tension before words appear, grief without explanation, responsibility for the atmosphere, whatever's going on. Safety becomes merging. They learn connection requires disappearance. All right, so Jupiter creates early burdens like rescuing dynamics, forgiveness without repair, spiritual rationalization of harm, and over-compassion towards dysfunction. So the inner feminine becomes spiritual absorption, psychological merging, collective empathy, archetypal awareness, future symbol tracking, and unconscious pattern recognition. Pisces learns internally. Everything connects. But here's the distortion. Because containment boundaries are thin, Pisces absorbs others' grief, collective anxiety, relational tension, moral suffering, and unspoken emotion before identity stabilizes. They feel humanity before they feel self. So, inner feminine overload produces emotional flooding from Effie and Venus, which we are getting into next. Identity diffusion, savior impulses, exhaustion without visible cause, disassociation, and withdrawal into imagination. They are not overwhelmed by events, they are overwhelmed by meaning. All right, so now we're going to move into the outer feminine with extroverted feeling parent and Venus in exaltation. So I'm actually going to take a break and splice these videos together. All right, moving on to FE parent, extroverted feeling parent, and Venus exalted for Pisces. This represents relational attunement, the emotional field regulator, and harmony stabilization. After the inner feminine quadrant absorbs reality through symbolic perception and meaning, the psyche must decide how to regulate to the human environment around it. This function is governed by extroverted feeling or FE, operating in the parent position within the Pisces or INFJ cognitive architecture. If the inner feminine experiences the symbolic atmosphere of life, the outer feminine determines how to respond to the emotional environment created by other people. Extroverted feeling is not simply emotion. It is a perceptual and regulatory system designed to monitor the emotional equilibrium of a group. Where introverted intuition looks inward towards patterns and meaning, FE scans outward towards relational dynamics. It constantly tracks how individuals affect one another and how the emotional atmosphere of a room is shifting. Tone of voice, facial expression, body posture, and subtle social cues all become sources of information that FE organizes into an internal map of relational stability. Because FE operates externally, Pisces individuals with strong FE parent energy often develop a remarkable sensitivity to the emotional climate around them. They can enter a room and almost immediately sense tension, discomfort, excitement, or sadness without anyone explicitly stating it. The psyche begins adjusting instinctively, softening tone, shifting language, or altering behavior to stabilize the emotional field. This is not manipulation. It is a form of environmental regulation, similar to how the body adjusts temperature or balance to maintain equilibrium. Within the Pisces archetype, this relational sensitivity is amplified by the exaltation of Venus. So, in astrological terms, Venus is considered exalted in Pisces because the planet of love, beauty, and relational harmony expresses its most unconditional form here. Venus seeks connection, appreciation, aesthetic harmony, and emotional sweetness. When operating through Pisces, Venus expands beyond transactional relationships and moves toward compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional care. This creates a powerful stabilizing instinct. Pisces individuals often feel responsible for maintaining harmony between people. When conflict arises, the FE Venus system activates automatically, attempting to soothe tension and restore connection. The psyche begins translating emotional signals, helping one person understand another, or softening harsh interactions before they escalate. In many cases, Pisces becomes the emotional mediator within social environments. FE parent, I'm having a hard time scrolling today. FE parent structure carries a protective quality. It does not merely respond emotionally, it feels responsible for the well being of others. The parent position naturally adapts a stabilizing role, ensuring the emotional chaos does not overwhelm relationships or environments. When combined with the compassionate influence of Venus, this produces a relational style that is patient, understanding, and often remarkably forgiving. This is why Pisces individuals frequently become the emotional anchors within groups. Friends may confide in them, strangers may reveal personal stories unexpectedly, and conflicts may gravitate toward them for resolution. The psyche projects a sense of openness and safety that encourages people to lower their defenses. Others intuitively feel that they will be understood rather than judged. However, this relational sensitivity also carries a subtle burden. When the FE Venus system becomes overdeveloped relative to the inner masculine structure, which is TI child and Mercury in left field, Pisces may begin stabilizing emotional environments before stabilizing themselves. Harmony becomes a priority even when boundaries are necessary. The individual may attempt to keep everyone comfortable rather than confronting uncomfortable truths that would create temporary conflict, but long term clarity. Venus exalted intensifies this tendency to idealize love and connection. Relationships are perceived through a lens of compassion and possibility. The psyche may assume that empathy, patience, and understanding will eventually heal relational problems. Because Pisces naturally perceives the deeper suffering behind people's behavior, it may extend forgiveness repeatedly, hoping that understanding will inspire change. Honestly, you are enabling. This creates one of the central distortions of the Pisces archetype, care replacing boundary. The individual continues accommodating emotional environments that may be unstable or unhealthy because maintaining compassion feels morally correct. Conflict can feel like a form of harm rather than a necessary process of relational clarity. At its healthiest expression, however, the FE parent and Venus exaltation combination creates extraordinary relational intelligence. Pisces becomes capable of holding emotional complexity without reacting impulsively. They can listen deeply, translate perspectives between opposing individuals, and create spaces where vulnerability is safe. Compassion becomes not just a feeling, but a stabilizing force within communities. In this integrated state, Pisces individuals often function as counselors, mediators, teachers, or artists whose work communicates emotional truth. Their ability to perceive meaning through NI and Neptune allows them to understand the deeper story behind human behavior, while Effie and Venus allow them to communicate that understanding with warmth and empathy. The key challenge for Pisces is learning that compassion does not require self erasure. The outer feminine quadrant is meant to stabilize relationships, but it cannot replace the structural role of the inner masculine and outer masculine quadrants. Without these boundaries, emotional harmony becomes unsustainable because the individual is constantly absorbing and regulating environments without protecting their own psychological stability. When balanced correctly, Effie, Parent, and Venus Exalted become powerful tools for healing social environments. The Pisces individual can maintain compassion while still honoring personal limits. Harmony becomes a conscious choice rather than an unconscious obligation. So, this outer feminine quadrant represents the relational stabilization layer of the Pisces psyche. It translates the symbolic perception of the inner feminine into interpersonal care, where Ni, Neptune, and Jupiter interpret the meaning of existence. Effie and Venus determine how that understanding is expressed toward other human beings. Through this combination, Pisces does not simply perceive the emotional and some symbolic layers of reality. They attempt to restore connection with it. This is why their presence often feels calming, compassionate, and emotionally spacious to others. Pisces carries the capacity to see suffering clearly and still respond with kindness. They do not simply observe human emotion, they attempt to heal the field in which it exists. So, Venus exalted in Pisces, compassion, devotion, idealized love, and relational mercy. If Neptune creates the ocean of meaning and Jupiter expands that ocean into belief and philosophy, Venus exalted in Pisces governs how love moves inside that ocean. Venus in astrology represents attraction, connection, pleasure, affection, and the ways human beings bond with one another. It governs what we find beautiful, what we cherish, and what we are willing to remain loyal to. Venus normally operates through reciprocity, through mutual exchange of care, attention, and affection. But when Venus is exalted in Pisces, something very different happens. Love stops operating through balance and begins operating through devotion. Pisces Venus does not ask the usual Venetian question: what do I receive from this relationship? Instead, it asks something much larger. What is the soul of this person? Venus exalted in Pisces sees the potential of love rather than the behavior of love. It sees the wounded child beneath the angry adult, the frightened heart beneath the defensive mask, the divine spark beneath the damaged human. This is why Pisces Venus often appears impossibly compassionate to other personalities. They are not responding only to what someone does, they are responding to what someone could become, seeing the potential in others. This creates a form of relational perception that is almost mystical. When other Venus where other Venus placements evaluate behavior and compatibility, Pisces Venus evaluates spiritual essence. Love becomes less transactional and more devotional. It is not simply affection, it is sacred empathy. This is why Venus is considered exalted here. Pisces expresses the highest octave of Venetian love: unconditional compassion, forgiveness, emotional openness, and the willingness to see beauty inside imperfection. And in its healthiest form, this is extraordinary. Pisces Venus can love people when they are broken. It can forgive without humiliation. It can hold space for emotional pain without becoming defensive. It creates healers, artists, musicians, caregivers, spiritual teachers, and people who instinctively understand that love is not simply romance. It is a force that softens the human condition. But this exaltation also carries a shadow. Because when love becomes devotion, boundaries can dissolve. Venus in Pisces does not instinctively measure fairness, it measures compassion. So instead of asking, is this relationship balanced? Pisces may ask, is this person suffering? And if the answer is yes, the Venetian instinct becomes to help, soothe, forgive, or remain. This is where Venus interacts with Neptune in a way that can create distortion. Neptune dissolves boundaries and Venus sanctifies connection. Together, they can produce the classic Pisces relational pattern. Love becomes redemptive. Pisces Venus often believes love can heal people, not just comfort them, but transform them. They may interpret relational pain as a spiritual lesson rather than a signal that a boundary needs to be enforced. They may forgive repeatedly because they can see the humanity beneath the harmful behavior. And when this pattern goes too far, Venus exalted becomes Venus dissolved. Love stops being a mutual exchange and becomes emotional absorption. Pisces begins carrying the emotional weight of the relationship while the other person continues behaving the same way. This is one of the reasons Pisces often appears endlessly compassionate until they suddenly disappear. Because Pisces does not confront, so Pisces does not confront early. They soften, they empathize, they reinterpret, and they forgive. But eventually, the nervous system reaches saturation. And once that happens, the psyche often withdraws entirely rather than escalating conflict. This is the Venus-Neptune withdrawal pattern. Pisces does not explode like Scorpio, they evaporate. To outsiders, this can look mysterious or confusing, but internally, the decision has been forming for a long time. Pisces stayed because they believed in the possibility of love. They leave when that possibility finally collapses. When integrated, however, Venus exalted in Pisces becomes one of the most powerful relational forces because it does not love superficially, it loves existentially. It recognizes the sacredness of human vulnerability. It understands that everyone is carrying invisible wounds, and it responds with grace instead of judgment. When healthy, Pisces Venus does not abandon compassion, it simply learns to pair compassion with discernment. Love becomes both soft and wise. Pisces can still see the wounded soul beneath someone's behavior, but they no longer sacrifice themselves trying to rescue it. Pisces can still see the wounded soul beneath someone's behavior. Oh, I just said that. They recognize that compassion does not require self erasure. This is the integration point. Love remains unconditional in spirit, but not unlimited in behavior. The Pisces individual learns that boundaries do not destroy love, they protect it. And when this balance is achieved, Venus exalted becomes exactly what was meant to be, not naive devotion, but sacred relational intelligence. The ability to see beauty in the human soul while still standing firmly inside one's own. Sapphi and Venus is the regulating others emotionally. Relational stabilization field. So if inner Okay, so Effie parent reads relational equilibrium instantly. Pisces tracks who feels excluded, emotional imbalance, moral tension, and interpersonal suffering. Venus exalted here makes harmony sacred. Connection becomes moral duty. Pisces unconsciously believes if love exists, suffering should stop. So they stabilize environments through kindness, understanding, accommodation, emotional translation, and forgiveness. They soften conflict automatically. All right, so this is a lot of recapping. So they instinctively soothe environments, mirror emotions, soften conflict, maintain harmony, and emotionally regulate others. They become emotional translators. All right, so I'm not going to go through all of this. I think I did a pretty good job. So Venus exaltation effect. Venus here seeks unconditional love. So Pisces tolerates imbalance, emotional inconsistency, unclear boundaries, and one-sided care because connection feels sacred. They preserve emotional unity at a personal cost. All right, so that's enough on that. Now we are moving into inner masculine with introverted thinking child and Mercury in left field. All right, so the inner masculine for Pisces. Private logic, internal truth formation, and delayed self-definition. After the inner feminine absorbs symbolic meaning and the outer feminine stabilizes the relational environment, the psyche eventually turns inward towards a different task, defining truth for itself. This process belongs to the inner masculine quadrant, governed in the cognitive architecture by TI, introverted thinking, in the child position, and supported by Mercury operating in left field or its unconventional expression. So, where the previous quadrants are focused on perception and relational harmony, this quadrant introduces something fundamentally different: internal structure. The inner masculine is the beginning of sovereignty within the psyche. It asks questions that the earlier quadrants often postpone. What is actually true? What belongs to me and what does not? Where do I stand inside this situation? Introverted thinking is not concerned with external systems or social consensus. Instead, it is internal logic coherence. TI analyzes ideas privately, stripping away emotional assumptions and examining whether something truly makes sense. It constructs mental frameworks that allow a person to understand reality in a precise and internally consistent way. For the Pisces or the INFJ archetype, this process develops more slowly than the earlier perceptual and relational functions. Because NI, Neptune, Jupiter, Fe, and Venus activate so strongly in the earlier quadrants, the psyche spends much of its early development immersed in meaning, imagination, and emotional connection. By the time TI begins asserting itself, the individual has already absorbed a tremendous amount of symbolic and relational information. As a result, TI child often operates quietly in the background. It begins asking analytical questions about the patterns and emotions that have already been perceived. The mind starts dissecting experiences that were previously accepted through empathy or intuition. This can feel like a sudden shift from emotional immersion into intellectual clarity. The child position of TI is important because it shapes how this logic appears in behavior. The child function is curious, exploratory, and sometimes playful. It does not initially enforce rigid systems the way a dominant thinking function might. Instead, it experiments with ideas, it questions assumptions, it tries to understand the mechanics of reality beneath the emotional narratives that previously guided perception. This is why Pisces individuals often develop a surprisingly sharp analytical side that others do not expect. People may initially perceive them as purely emotional, artistic, or intuitive. Many people but once TI activates, the individual begins examining reality with quiet precision. They start asking logical questions about relationships, systems, and beliefs that previously operated on compassion or intuition alone. Mercury's role in this quadrant adds another interesting dimension. In traditional astrology, Mercury governs communication, analysis, language, and intellectual processing. So, in the Pisces archetype, Mercury does not operate in a conventional analytical environment. Instead, it functions within a symbolic ocean created by Ni and Neptune. Ideas appear suddenly rather than through linear step by step reasoning. This is why the analytical insights of Pisces often feel unexpected or left field. The mind may appear quiet or reflective for long periods of time, absorbing information and observing patterns. Then suddenly, an insight emerges that connects directly to the logical core of a situation. Because this realization has been forming subconsciously, it may appear to others as though the individual has abruptly changed perspective. In reality, the analytical process has been unfolding internally the entire time. This delayed logical activation often creates a distinctive developmental pattern in Pisces individuals. Early in life, they may rely heavily on empathy and intuition to navigate relationships. They attempt to understand people through compassion and symbolic interpretation. But as TI child matures, the psyche begins questioning the structure of those relationships. It asks whether compassion is being reciprocated, whether boundaries are necessary, and whether certain dynamics truly make sense. These realizations can be transformative. The individual who once tolerated confusion or imbalance in order to preserve harmony suddenly begins analyzing the situation logically. Emotional narratives give way to structural questions. Does this relationship function in a healthy way? Are these expectations realistic? Is this belief system coherent? Because this shift occurs internally, it can surprise those around them. People may perceive the Pisces individual as suddenly becoming distant, analytical, or detached. In truth, the inner masculine has simply begun asserting its role within the psyche. The individual is learning to distinguish between understanding others and defining truth for themselves. This process marks the beginning of personal sovereignty. For the Pisces archetype, developing the inner masculine is essentially because it provides the structural clarity necessary to balance compassion with discernment. Without TI, empathy can become limitless and overwhelming. With TI, the individual gains the ability to differentiate between emotional understanding and logical responsibility. So, however, because TI is a child function in this architecture, it can sometimes appear inconsistently. There may be moments of brilliant clarity followed by periods of hesitation or uncertainty. The mind may oscillate between intuitive empathy and analytical detachment as it learns how to integrate these different modes of perception. Mercury's influence contributes to this dynamic by allowing insights to arrive in sudden bursts. Rather than constructing conclusions gradually, the mind may suddenly recognize a logical pattern that was previously hidden within emotional complexity. These realizations can feel almost like intellectual awakenings, epiphanies, moments where the structure of a situation becomes unmistakably clear. When this quadrant becomes integrated, the Pisces individual gains an important new capability, the ability to understand compassion intellectually as well as emotionally. They can still perceive suffering and symbolic meaning through NI and Neptune, but TI allows them to interpret those experiences within coherent frameworks. Compassion becomes guided by discernment rather than unlimited emotional absorption. Within this, the inner masculine quadrant represents the emergence of internal authority. It is where the Pisces psyche begins transitioning from pure absorption of reality toward defining its own position within it. The individual starts asking not only what something means, but what it logically implies and how they should respond. This is a stage where the Pisces individual begins constructing a private philosophy of life. Beliefs, moral frameworks, and the intellectual models begin forming internally. These frameworks help organize the vast symbolic and emotional information that the earlier quadrants have gathered. When healthy, this integration allows Pisces to balance empathy with clarity. They can understand the emotional complexity of human behavior while still maintaining internal standards for truth and responsibility. Compassion remains present, but it is now supported by discernment. This is the moment when Pisces begins to shift from simply absorbing reality to interpreting it with wisdom. The inner masculine does not replace compassion, it gives compassion structure. All right, so Mercury in the left field. Silent insight, symbolic thinking, internal interpretation, and hidden logic. If Neptune creates the ocean of meaning and Jupiter expands that ocean into belief and philosophy, and Venus governs how compassion moves through the ocean, Mercury governs how Pisces thinks about what it perceives. Mercury in astrology represents cognition, language, analysis, communication, and the mechanisms through which information becomes understanding. It governs how the mind organizes perception into concepts and how those concepts become speech, ideas, and decisions. In most signs, Mercury functions close to the surface of awareness, like Gemini and Virgo. Thoughts move relatively quickly into words. Ideas become conversation. Perception becomes explanation. But in Pisces, Mercury does not sit in the front of the psyche. Mercury lives in the left field. This means the thinking process of Pisces often happens outside the visible center of consciousness. Thoughts develop quietly, internally and symbolically before they appear as spoken language. Pisces does not immediately verbalize what it perceives. Instead, the psyche absorbs the experience first. Neptune dissolves the emotional atmosphere, Jupiter expands the meaning, and I identifies the pattern. And only after those processes unfold does Mercury begin translating that experience into thought. This is why Pisces often appears reflective, quiet, or slow to respond during conversations or emotionally complex situations. It is not because they lack insight, it is because their inner thinking process is deeply internal and symbolic before it becomes verbal. Where other Mercury placements analyze through logic first, Pisces Mercury analyzes through meaning, a deeper layer of the mind. The mind moves through imagery, metaphor, emotional context, and intuition. Thought often appears as impression before articulation. Pisces may know what something means long before they can explain why it means that. This is Mercury operating through the waters of Neptune rather than the clarity of air. Because of this, Pisces often communicates through symbolism rather than direct explanation. Stories, metaphors, music, art, poetry, and emotional expression become natural languages for this placement. These forms allow Mercury to translate complex emotional insight into something that can be shared with others. Their minds do not think only in linear sentences, they think in images and emotional narratives. So, when conflict occurs, Pisces usually perceives the emotional dynamic first. They feel the tension in the room, they sense the motivations behind someone's behavior. They intuitively understand the deeper pattern unfolding beneath the surface. But Mercury does not immediately move this perception into confrontation or verbal explanation. Instead, the psyche continues processing internally. Pisces thinks about what happened. They reflect, they analyze quietly. They replay emotional interactions in their mind while trying to understand the meaning behind them. By the time Pisces finally speaks about a situation, they have often already thought about it extensively in private. This is why others sometimes experience Pisces as mysterious or difficult to read. The mind has already traveled through layers of interpretation before the conversation even begins. Mercury in the left field creates a form of internal and intellectual processing that remains mostly invisible to others. This placement also contributes to the perception that Pisces is intuitive rather than analytical. But this is misleading. Pisces can be extremely analytical. The difference is that their analysis often occurs inside the emotional and symbolic framework created by Neptune and Jupiter rather than through purely logical systems. They are analyzing patterns of meaning, emotional cause and effect, the motivations and wounds behind human behavior. This makes Pisces particularly skilled at understanding the psychological dimensions of human experience. But because Mercury sits outside the primary decision making structure, that understanding does not always translate into direct communication or immediate confrontation. Instead of saying this behavior is unacceptable, Pisces may think, what pain created this behavior? Instead of explaining their analysis immediately, they may continue observing the pattern, hoping the situation resolves through empathy rather than conflict. This is where Mercury in the left field can contribute to distortion. Because thinking happens internally, Pisces may understand exactly what is happening in a situation, but delay expressing that understanding. They may process privately rather than speak openly. They may interpret meaning rather than enforce boundaries. The insight exists, but it remains internal. This dynamic becomes particularly visible in relationships. Pisces may see problems developing long before others recognize them. And I perceive the trajectory, Neptune senses the emotional undercurrent, and Mercury quietly analyzes the implications. But instead of confronting the issue immediately, the psyche continues processing. They observe, they empathize, they reinterpret, they wait, sometimes hoping the emotional dynamic will resolve on its own. Over time, this creates a familiar Pisces relational pattern where others are unaware of the depth of internal processing happening beneath the surface. Pisces appears calm, patient, and understanding. But internally, the mind has been analyzing the situation for months or even years. When the moment of departure finally arrives, others are often surprised. They interpret the decision as sudden, but from the perspective of Pisces, the conclusion has already been reached internally long before the external change occurs. Mercury simply did not express the analysis earlier. So, this is one of the reasons Pisces exits often appear quiet rather than dramatic. Scorpio confronts, Aries reacts, Capricorn enforces, Pisces reflects. And once the internal understanding becomes undeniable, they simply step away. The insight had already formed beneath the surface. When integrated, however, Mercury in the left field becomes an extraordinary cognitive strength. Instead of suppressing insight, Pisces learns to bring their internal analysis into conscious communication earlier. They learn to trust their perception enough to express it. Mercury begins translating symbolic understanding into clear language. The individual becomes capable of articulating emotional truths that others struggle to explain. They can describe complex dynamics with clarity and nuance. All right, so what else do I want to say about this? So this is very fragile. It's their fragile internal masculine structure. This quadrant explains Pisces' lifelong struggle with certainty. TI child wants internal clarity, but in Pisces, logic develops inside the symbolic ocean. So instead of enforcing structure, TI explores endlessly. What is truth? What is consciousness? What is reality? What does this mean? So inner masculine develops late. Decisions feel heavy because certainty feels artificial. They hesitate to define reality too rigidly. So the distortion without strong inner masculine, boundaries remain conceptual, decisions delay, self-definition blurs, and others define reality for them. Pisces understands everything but struggles to make a decision. They can explain everyone's motives except their own. Delayed differentiation. So only after absorption does Pisces begin asking, what does this mean? What is true? Where am I inside this? Understanding arrives privately and late. So, TI child under pressure. When finally activated, emotional detachment appears suddenly, analytical coldness surprises others. TI is considered to be the icy sword of truth. They can tear you up and down intellectually, and just through their words alone, you would be surprised. Relationships are reassessed rapidly and illusions collapse. People think Pisces changed. They didn't, they just finally differentiated. This is the birth of sovereignty. Now we're going to move to the outer masculine with extroverted sensing inferior and earth in fall. Embodied action, boundary enforcement, and physical reality engagement. After the psyche absorbs symbolic meaning through the inner feminine, regulates relational harmony through the outer feminine, and develops internal logic through the inner masculine, the final quadrant of development emerges, the outer masculine. This quadrant governs how a person interacts with the physical world. In this realm of action, boundaries, confrontation, and material reality. For the Pisces or INFJ archetype, this quadrant is governed by extroverted sensing or SE in the inferior position. In this cognitive architecture, SE represents the least comfortable function in conscious awareness. It is the gateway through which the individual must eventually engage with the tangible world, the present moment, physical environment, and immediate sensory reality. So SE does represent the five senses. As you can see, the symbol there, the five senses, experiencing through the five senses. So, where NI looks inward towards abstract patterns and future trajectories, SE focuses outward on what is happening right now. It processes concrete information through the senses, sight, sound, movement, touch, and spatial awareness. SE is the function that allows a person to react quite quickly, enforce boundaries directly, and navigate the physical environment with decisiveness. For the Pisces psyche, this mode of engagement can feel overwhelming. After spending so much cognitive energy processing symbolic meaning, imagination, emotional atmospheres, and philosophical insights, the abrupt demands of the physical world can feel harsh and intrusive. Reality becomes loud, immediate, and impossible to interpret symbolically before responding. This is why the outer masculine quadrant represents one of the most difficult developmental challenges for the Pisces archetype. It requires translating deep internal understanding into visible action. Boundaries must be expressed physically. Decisions must be made in real time. Conflict must sometimes be confronted directly rather than interpreted compassionately. Astrologically, this challenge is intensified by Earth in fall. Earth represents the domain of structure, material responsibility, and tangible consequences. When Earth operates in a weakened position, physical reality can feel burdensome or restrictive compared to the limitless imagination and emotional worlds already active within the psyche. Tasks that require direct engagement with material structure, like deadlines, logistical demands, routine obligations, or physical confrontations, may feel exhausting to the Pisces individual. The body must suddenly operate in a dense environment that does not respond to symbolic interpretation or emotional nuance. The physical world demands clear decisions and immediate responses. Because SE sits in the inferior position, Pisces often delays engaging this quadrant until external pressure forces activation. Rather than confronting problems immediately, the psyche may continue analyzing meaning, understanding perspectives, or hoping emotional harmony will resolve the situation. The inner and outer feminine quadrants remain active far longer than they would in archetypes with stronger sensing functions. Eventually, reality demands embodiment. Boundaries must be enforced, decisions must be made, situations must be confronted directly. When this moment arrives, the transition can feel abrupt and intense. This is why Pisces often appears passive or accommodating for long periods of time and then suddenly withdraw or exit a situation completely. The inferior SE function does not gradually assert itself. It often activates only after emotional or psychological overload occurs. When the nervous system can no longer process meaning or maintain harmony, it shifts abruptly into physical disengagement. Instead of outward aggression, Pisces tends towards dematerialization as a form of defense. The individual may withdraw, detach, disappear from environments, or quietly sever connections rather than escalating conflict. To others, this behavior may appear sudden or confusing, but internally it represents the psyche protecting itself from sensory and emotional overload. Because SE governs present moment engagement, Pisces may also experience difficulty remaining grounded in immediate reality when overwhelmed. The mind may retreat into imagination, symbolism, or reflection rather than confronting the physical moment directly. Activities that stimulate the senses, movement, nature, art, music, or physical environments can help restore balance because they reconnect the psyche with the body. The developmental task of this quadrant is therefore embodiment. Pisces must learn how to bring the immense symbolic and emotional understanding of the earlier quadrants into physical expression. Vision must translate into action. Compassion must translate into boundaries. Insight must translate into decisions. When integrated, SE inferior becomes an unexpected strength. Instead of overwhelming the psyche, sensory awareness becomes grounding. The individual can move through the physical world with greater presence and confidence. Decisions are made before emotional exhaustion occurs. Boundaries are communicated directly rather than implied through emotional signals. At this stage, the Pisces archetype becomes capable of balancing imagination with embodiment. The individual can hold symbolic meaning internally while still responding effectively to immediate reality. The body and the psyche begin working together rather than existing in separate worlds. Earth energy also stabilizes. The material world no longer feels like an oppressive limitation, but a structure through which vision can be realized. Ideas, art, healing practices, or philosophical insights begin taking concrete form through action and commitment. Within the architecture of the outer masculine quadrant, this represents the point where perception becomes consequence. It is the stage where the individual moves from understanding reality to actively shaping it. For Pisces, this transformation is particularly powerful because it allows the archetype to fulfill its highest potential. The symbolic insight of Ni, the imaginative depth of Neptune, the expansive meaning of Jupiter, and the compassion of Effie and Venus can finally move beyond internal experience and become visible in the world. The Pisces individual no longer dissolves under pressure. They act with clarity while still holding compassion. Embodiment becomes the final stage of integration. So, what once absorbed reality now has the ability to transform it through presence. All right, so Earth in fall. I am really pushing myself hard tonight. Per every night. It's just a thing. All right, so Earth in fall. Embodiment, difficulty, material gravity, and boundary through reality. If Neptune dissolves boundaries, Jupiter expands meaning, Venus sanctifies connection, Earth represents something entirely different. Earth represents reality itself. The physical world, time, bodies, money, boundaries, responsibility, and consequences. Earth energy is what grounds consciousness into matter. It is what forces ideas, emotions, and beliefs to translate into physical action and tangible structure. Where Neptune moves through dream and symbolism, Earth moves through gravity and form. And for the Pisces archetype, this is precisely where tension emerges. Because in Pisces, Earth is considered in fall. So, it doesn't mean Earth energy is absent. It means Earth is operating in an environment that is fundamentally opposite to its natural expression. Earth wants definition. Pisces dissolves definition. Earth wants containment. Pisces dissolves containment. Earth wants boundaries. Pisces dissolves boundaries. Earth wants measurable consequences. Pisces wants universal compassion. So, an Earth energy attempts to operate inside the Pisces psyche. It can feel heavy, intrusive, and restrictive compared to the fluid, imaginative, and emotional worlds that Pisces naturally inhabits. When other archetypes may find clarity through practical structure, Pisces often experiences material structure as constrictive. Deadlines feel abrupt, confrontation feels harsh, financial realities feel dense, physical conflict feels overwhelming. Not because Pisces lacks intelligence or responsibility, but because their nervous system is calibrated first for meaning, emotion, and symbolism, not material enforcement. Earth asks what is actually happening right now. Pisces instinctively ask, what does this mean? This difference can create a delay between perception and action. Pisces may fully understand a situation emotionally and symbolically long before they are ready to act on it physically. They may sense relational imbalance immediately. They may understand the emotional truth of a conflict. They may even foresee where a situation is heading. But translating that awareness into direct material action, setting a boundary, leaving a situation, confronting someone, restructuring their environment can take much longer. Because the Pisces psyche attempts to resolve conflict internally before altering reality externally. They interpret, they empathize, they search for meaning, they imagine alternative outcomes, but the physical world does not always respond to symbolic reinterpretation. Eventually, reality demands action. Bills must be paid, decisions must be made, boundaries must be enforced. And this is where Earth and fall becomes visible. For Pisces, material reality often becomes the final teacher. The lesson arrives through experience rather than abstraction. They may tolerate situations for a long time because they can still find meaning or compassion within them. But once the material consequences become undeniable, exhaustion, emotional depletion, loss of stability, the psyche is forced into embodiment. Earth says this must change. And when that moment arrives, Pisces often shifts suddenly from emotional absorption into physical disengagement. They withdraw, they leave, they detach from the environment that has become too heavy to sustain. To others, this can look abrupt. All right, so these environments, they normally become, let's see, where was I at? So this dynamic also explains why Pisces often seek environments that soften the impact of material reality: art, music, nature, spiritual communities, creative work, and healing professions. These environments allow Pisces to interact with the physical world through symbolic expression rather than rigid structure. So instead of confronting reality purely through logistics and confrontation, they can translate emotional and spiritual insight into creative form. This is In this way, Earth becomes something Pisces can shape rather than something they must endure. The developmental task of Earth is there for embodiment. All right, so What do I want to get into now? What am I at? I'm at like 2 hours this evening. All right, so I'm going to end with the collapse pattern. Let me see how long this is. How many more? I've got tons more pages here. All right, so I'm going to go briefly into the collapse pattern, and then I'm going to have to split this into another video. All right, let me get back to where I was. All right. Collapse pattern, core wound, burnout, shadow extraction, and integration law. All right. So, collapse pattern, Pisces collapse pattern. Disillusion instead of confrontation. So Virgo burns out through overfunctioning, Taurus collapses through numbness and inertia, Capricorn hardens through control, Scorpio detonates through confrontation. Pisces collapses through dissolution because Pisces processes reality primarily through symbolic meaning. Emotional absorption, overwhelming situations are not immediately met with confrontation. Instead, the psyche begins attempting to reinterpret the situation in ways that soften the emotional impact. Conflict becomes something to understand rather than something to enforce against. So this creates a specific sequence of psychological responses. So this is just a recap. So first, Pisces perceives through NI and Neptune and Jupiter, which registers the subtle cues beneath what is being said or done. The psyche senses the tension, the suffering, or the misalignment long before it becomes visible externally. Second, Pisces begins to absorb the emotional environment. Effie and Venus pull the individual towards empathy and compassion. Instead of separating themselves from the situation, they move closer to it emotionally, attempting to understand everyone involved. Third, the mind begins to spiritualize or reinterpret the situation. I gotta cough. Starting to lose my voice, unfortunately. All right, so Jupiter expands the narrative. The conflict becomes. All right, where was I? Instead of separating themselves from the situation, they move closer to it emotionally, attempting to understand everyone involved. Third, the mind begins to spiritualize or reinterpret the situation. So the conflict becomes part of a larger story about growth, karma, trauma, or healing. Meaning becomes a way to soften the immediate pressure of the moment. But eventually, the emotional weight becomes too great for the system to contain. At that point, the final step occurs. Pisces withdrawals. Instead of escalating conflict or enforcing boundaries aggressively, the psyche detaches from the environment that created the overload. All right. So, Pisces core wound, love through self-sacrifice. Every archetype carries an earlier psychological belief about how belonging is achieved. Cancer learns I belong if I care. Virgo learns I belong if I am useful. Taurus learns I survive if I provide. Pisces learns something different. Pisces often learns I am loved when I sacrifice. Because Pisces is highly attuned to emotional environments, many Pisces individuals grow up sensing the emotional needs of others very early. They become aware of sadness, conflict, or instability in their surroundings and instinctively attempt to soothe or understand it. Compassion becomes their pathway to belonging. All right, so I'm going to take this down and focus on capping this video off. I'm exhausted and losing my voice. I do apologize. All right, so compassion becomes their pathway to belonging. If they can understand people deeply enough, forgive generously enough, or absorb enough emotional pain, they believe harmony can be restored. Over time, this creates a powerful identity pattern. Pisces begins equating love with self erasure. So, all right, why do I keep losing my spot? What did I do to myself here? I think I literally, I don't know. I'm too exhausted to go on, I think. All right, self sacrifice. So they may feel responsible for easing suffering around them, even when that suffering is not theirs to carry. This belief creates many of the relational patterns associated with Pisces: savior complexes, martyr tendencies, forgiving behavior that continues beyond healthy limits, difficulty enforcing boundaries against suffering people. The core wound is not weakness, it is misdirected compassion. Pisces believes love requires absorbing pain. Integration occurs when they realize compassion does not require self erasure. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna cap this. I'm almost done. I'm so close to capping. All right, so I'm not gonna cap this off yet. I am feeling the energy leaving my body. All right, so Pisces burnout pattern, emotional flooding and disassociation. Pisces burnout does not usually appear dramatic. Instead, it appears as emotional flooding followed by withdrawal. Because Pisces absorbs emotional atmospheres so deeply, they often carry the psychological weight of environments long before others recognize that something is wrong. They continue offering empathy, support, or understanding while slowly becoming overwhelmed internally. Over time, the nervous system begins to exhaust its capacity to regulate the emotional field. This leads to several recognizable symptoms: compassion fatigue, emotional numbness, escapism through fantasy or distraction, avoidance of emotionally intense environments, disassociation from previously meaningful relationships. Instead of confronting the source of burnout directly, the psyche seeks distance from people, from responsibilities, and from emotional environments that feel overwhelming. The individual may retreat into solitude, creative expression, or private reflection as a way of restoring balance. This withdrawal is not laziness or avoidance, it is the nervous system attempting to protect itself from overload. Pisces shadow extraction pattern. Becoming the emotional sponge. Every archetype has a shadow dynamic where its strengths become sources of imbalance. So for Taurus, this appears as passive extraction through comfort and stability. For Pisces, the shadow appears as emotional absorption extraction. Because Pisces individuals are highly empathetic and compassionate, people naturally gravitate towards them for emotional support. Friends confide in them, strangers share their stories, relationships often lean on them for understanding and forgiveness. At first, this appears positive. Pisces becomes the emotional healer of the group. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. The environment begins depending on Pisces to regulate tension. Others release their thoughts, and feelings. Pisces aren't just emotional. It's not just about the emotional world, it goes so much deeper than that. But, anyways, so Pisces becomes the container for emotional, relational chaos while others continue behaving the same way. This creates a slow imbalance. Pisces absorbs the weight but receives little structure, support in return. They become the psychological drainage system of the environment. Because compassion is central to their identity, they may not recognize this imbalance until exhaustion forces them to step away. The shadow is not that Pisces cares too much. The shadow is that they sometimes carry burdens that were never theirs to hold. So, the integration law, containment before compassion. All right, so Pisces' lesson is simple but profound. Containment before compassion. Pisces does not need to reduce empathy. Their empathy is one of their greatest strengths. They must develop what they must develop, is structure that allows empathy to exist without destroying their boundaries. Containment means knowing when to step back from emotional environments, enforcing boundaries even when compassion exists, recognizing that suffering does not obligate sacrifice, translating understanding into action rather than endless interpretation. When containment develops, Pisces no longer dissolves under pressure. Their compassion remains powerful, but it operates within clear personal limits. So instead of absorbing the chaos, Pisces becomes capable of guiding others through it without drowning. Compassion becomes wisdom, empathy becomes leadership. All right. So I am capping this because I am totally exhausted. All right. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Happy birthday to all the Pisces out there. Love y'all. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I will have this book out eventually whenever I get done with all of the archetypes. I have what? Am I halfway through? I think this is number 6, right? I can't remember at this moment. Yeah. I am halfway through this moral cognitive series with containment, inner and outer, masculine and feminine containment. So I will have this book available eventually. If you want to look at my other books, I do have a master ego book on Pisces or the INFJ, so you can get a foundational somewhere to start. This is much more dense than the books that I already have for Pisces. So anyways, I'm just going to continue on. This is my soul. I love this work. I just absolutely love it. So Pisces are very good at understanding others, but be sure that you spend time to understand yourself. So I'm going to leave it there. Feel free to leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, y'all.